Hello, everybody. I'm the guy that's normally behind the scenes, and so just trying to make sure things are running as smoothly as possible. But welcome. We're glad that you're all here, and just by way of housekeeping, to give you the sort of big picture of the plan for today, we're going to have, as I hope you all got my email and that you have the schedule in front of you. And we're going to be just moving through a number of presentations. And so there will usually, I think there's just going to be one person on the screen with the exception of maybe the break. And because only one person is going to be on the screen at a time, sharing their comments, we are asking that everyone else turn off your microphones and cameras. I'm going to leave the option on for people to unmute themselves because things are a little smoother that way. But if you'll go ahead and turn your cameras and your microphones off, we'd appreciate that until the end of the meeting. At the end of the meeting, when we have the breakout rooms, then of course we want you to turn them on and unmute yourself because that's the time when there's going to be open, free sharing in our smaller groups. So there was one other, oh yeah, with the breakout rooms, I just wanted you to be all aware that everyone's just going to be randomly assigned. So there will be a facilitator for each breakout room, but they will be completely randomly assigned by the Zoom application. So when I create the rooms, it'll just it'll just put you in and assign you with someone. And I hope that's all right. If you have any concerns about that, like you really would like to be with someone, I'll be willing to accommodate. But for the most part, if you would just take the assignment and join the room that you're assigned to, we'd appreciate that. So I think that's all that I wanted to mention. And if you have any issues with how the meeting's running or something's not looking the way that you want it to, please send me a little private message in the chat, and I'll do my best to respond to it. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to John Cobb to get us started.
And I want to welcome you also. It's a real delight that so many of you have been able to come. And I am glad that you have met Richard. Richard is always behind the scenes, but without him, a meeting like this is something I would have not the foggiest idea of how to bring about. And, we are simply very, very fortunate to have him. So I'm glad you've met him, and please understand that he is a crucial member of our team. I wanted to just very briefly say that I consider this another important moment in the history of our process movement in this country. Very near the end of the last century, I think it was David Griffin who said, we must make the 21st century the Whitehead century. And the idea, or the process century, I'm not sure which language he used. And of course, we all laughed because we were so marginal at that time everywhere. But nevertheless, we took it rather seriously. And very early in the 21st century, China turned out to be really open. And Zhe and Mei Jun gave us a sense, well, if process thought can become a major part of the thinking of the Chinese leadership and following, maybe this isn't such a crazy idea after all. And we had a conference in 2015, and 300 Chinese, I think, came to that conference. But it was intended to say, okay, we've been working in lots and lots of areas. Now let's all work together to make a real difference in the history of the planet. It needs to change drastically, and we have a contribution to make to that change. And I think that since that time, there have been much more public activities on the part of people in the process movement. And then in the last couple of years, there seemed to be a reception to what was done in the name of of the process family that was much, much larger than anything that had happened before in this country. And this conference is really oriented to the United States. We're not trying to tell China how to move forward in the process direction or anywhere else in the world. But we Americans need to get our act together. And I'm hoping that we will see we really do have some wonderful possibilities. There are a couple of areas in which I think the breakthrough has already taken place. We want to see what's going on across the board. Now, please, as you listen to all of the presentations, if any ideas come to you that you would like to see taken seriously by the process community, please write them down or remember them so that when you get into your breakout room, you will be ready to say, here's an idea that we all need to be thinking about. And we do have plans to pick up after this conference and discuss seriously the ideas that you present. So please take that as a serious possibility and help us as much as you can. Okay, I think my time is up, and I don't want to be the first one to get us behind. So we will be asking Andrew Schwartz to tell us what the Center for Process Studies has been doing in the last 5 years.
Thank you, John. I'm excited to be here for part of this meeting. As I was looking through the agenda for the meeting today, I can actually, it's pretty clear to me how our community has undergone significant expansion since at least the planning of this 2015 Seizing an Alternative Conference, since basically none of the organizations represented other than the Center for Process Studies actually existed prior to the 2014, right, with the creation of Pando. I find that extremely exciting because it means the last 5 or 6 years, we've had a flourishing of new movements within our community. So I think perhaps what's more important than just how CPS itself has expanded since 2015 is actually how the emergence of these other organizations beyond CPS is changing what's possible for us. As John mentioned, I do think we're at a special time in history where process thought can play a significant role in the world stage. More and more people recognizing the absurdity of a mechanistic and reductionistic worldview, and more and more people recognizing the sort of common sense experience of interconnection, change, and all the types of things that are fundamental to a process relational perspective. So I'm excited toward the end of today when we hear reports from people about opportunities across a range of topics, right? Science and theology, et cetera. Regarding CPS specifically, we've undergone major transition. And most of that's been taking place just the last year or 2 years, right? So it started in the 1970s, 1973 officially, as a faculty center of Claremont School of Theology and Claremont Graduate University in Claremont, California. We are now have been relocated to Salem, Oregon, and are in the process of integrating with Willamette University. Our library is now housed and managed in cooperation with the university library. We've made several new hires. New program director, Andrew Davis, came on this fall. A couple years ago, we brought Jeremy Fackenthal on as the new director of our Whitehead International Film Festival, which actually within that time frame also was renamed the Common Good International Film Festival, representative of this shift that John had mentioned about being more sort of accessible and public facing with this sort of process perspective. This fall, we even created a new position, the cross-community coordinator role, intended to increase intentional collaboration across the process family and as well as process adjacent individuals and organizations, those who might not be familiar with Whitehead, but share some of these same intuitions. And John Gill is the first person to hold that position. We've relaunched our Korea project under the leadership of a PhD candidate, Dongwoo Lee, who is leading a team with partners in Seoul, Korea, with incredible access within the state or within the city of Seoul, especially. So I'm excited about what's possible there, especially around the vision of ecological civilization in the Korean context. The China project of the Center for Process Studies continues to flourish under the leadership of Mei-Jun Fan and Zhehe Wang. They have, since 2015, started partnering with a UNESCO-affiliated eco-village and started the Cobb Eco Academy. It's effectively a training program for leadership for an ecological civilization that involves living, learning, and working in the Sunshine Village, which is a very exciting development. Let's see, since 2015, the first volume of the critical edition of Whitehead was published. Second edition is actually now at the publisher being finalized. Transcription has already been completed for volumes 3 and 4. So we're on track to get a lot more of that project out. Personally, I moved to Oregon. I'm now living in Salem, Oregon, and have been working closely with the faculty at Willamette University, the faculty and administration. They've actually added me to the list of affiliated faculty for the university's Sustainability Institute, with the hope that CPS can take primary leadership over cross-disciplinary work in sustainability, for which they actually mean intersectional, sort of the intersection of social, economic, and environmental challenges. So it's not just a scientific thing, it's not just a environmental history thing, it's not just a political science thing, or so the Graduate School of Management, Graduate School of Law, and a variety of undergraduate departments are represented in the Sustainability Institute initiative, at which they want CPS to play a leading role. So anyways, yeah, so the developments are many, possibilities are endless, and I look forward to exploring the ways that we can co-create our future together. Thanks.
Thank you, Andrew. I think that the fact that we are now at a point where we can play a role in some universities, not many, but a few, that's a huge change from where we've been in the past. Thank you. Okay, we'll hear from Eugene Shirley.
Okay, thank you, John, Richard, and everyone who pulled this together. And it looks like 99 good friends out there. That's what it's showing as participants now. So I'm with Pando Populus, as some of you may know, and we are a positive impact accelerator based in Los Angeles County. And the main thing that I wanted to do is just talk about the interesting openings that we've had in working with the chief sustainability officers of LA County, and also with communities of women religious, primarily here in the area, but also around the country. All of these are for the purpose of bringing about what we call hyperlocal change. Pando is not a policy organization. It's not dealing with other aspects of change. We are instead really about bringing big ideas down to earth in hyperlocal ways. And so that's how we've defined the contribution that we make here. The CSO task force is a group of chief sustainability officers within LA County that are focused on change within their respective institutions, but there was no broader organization that allowed them all to come together and not only learn best practices from each other, but also make a contribution to the county as a whole. And so we pulled it together with the foundational help of LA City Council member Paul Koretz, and with John Onderdonk, who is the CSO of Caltech, who's the chair of the organization. CSO Task Force brings together the sustainability officers from government. There are 80-some cities within LA County alone, as probably you know. Business, from the big construction companies to the big studios. Any of the major players within the county will have chief sustainability officers. And then obviously higher ed, from Caltech to UCLA and etc. But then as a way of focusing geographically then, or having a place from which we can work, we thought it'd be very interesting and helpful to have a campus that would focus on what John very helpfully has described as transdisciplinary, project-driven, values-oriented education, because it's those three aspects that really bring us all together. And so we reached out to the Maryknoll sisters in Monrovia, who have a campus, 7.5 acre campus, that was has room for 80 people, but there are only 15 sisters there. And it started off serving the needs of LA County originally in 1930 for Japanese Americans with tuberculosis. And it always had this orientation towards radical commitment, but was lacking now in a reinvigorated purpose. And so we talked with the sisters about reorienting that campus to serve what Pope Francis calls integral ecology. John, of course, ecological civilization. The county itself will call community resilience, but all essentially meaning this deeply integrated way of looking at sustainability and justice issues. And we have the extremely promising opportunity there is that we are working to develop a model that which can be taken to other communities. We're already in conversation with a number across the country who are facing the same kind of issue of their real estate and other kinds of assets no longer serving the purpose that they were intended for, and or dwindling purpose. And so how can they be revitalized, reinvigorated towards in a mission-driven way? We've just started the first Pando at the Sisters of Social Service now in Encino, in addition to Pando at Maryknoll.
1 minute.
Okay, so these are the opportunities that we've had specifically through the Chief Sustainability Officer Task Force and through communities of women religious in order to bring those groups together to focus on hyper-local change. One, in my last 30 seconds, I'll say that probably the most successful concrete program that we've launched this year in doing it is called Pando Days, bringing together 10 colleges and universities to create change relative to the LA County Sustainability Plan. Two of the projects over the last 3 weeks two of the 10 that we just pushed through Pando Days have been picked up by outside sponsors, by Google and by the Mellon Foundation. And so we see if we can continue this process of acceleration, we hope to really be able to create some change within the county. Thank you.
Well, I think that the county really appreciates the help that Pando is given, and that's a relationship to the wider world that is very important. I appreciate it very much. And Philip Clayton, we'll ask you to tell us about wonderful work that ECI is beginning to do.
Welcome. Thanks, John. Let's just see that it will actually allow me to share screen. Looks like that's working just fine. I want to give you an update on the Institute for Ecological Civilization and dive right into it. We start with a core belief that is a strong statement of values. The trajectory of life on this planet is unsustainable. Underlying causes of the environmental crisis are inseparable from our social and economic systems. The massive inequality between rich and poor is not separate from our systems of unlimited growth, depletion of natural resources, extinctions, and global warming. And out of that, then, to formulate the flourishing of life in all its form, and to use that then, secondly, as a roadmap that leaders need, and something that grounds hope and stimulates necessary reforms. You see in this core belief the balance between a long-term vision and very specific work in concrete sectors with specific leaders. And that's been the equation of EcoCiv. The mission statement is as simple as you can get. Civilizational change is a big word, but well-being is brought about one sector at a time, one city at a time, and one partnership at a time. John's asked me to focus on things that we do that have led to greater impact and greater visibility, with the question of how similar techniques might work for other members of the process family. I'd like to limit myself just to 2 snapshots of what we do, and then to try to address John's challenge head on. The first one John alluded to in one of his letters. It's the book that just came out, The New Possible, together with a Silicon Valley entrepreneur. The book is now available on Amazon for just 99 cents. It's part of what the PR firm is doing to get it out in as many hands as possible for a few more days. Actually, I think only till tomorrow. So can I encourage you to go? It's under my name and also several others. But if you look up the new Possible Visions of Our World Beyond Crisis is the subtitle. And I'd encourage you to grab it and leave a review, please. If all 99 of us leave reviews, that will really help get the word out on Amazon. It includes an extremely diverse set of 28 different authors, a 17-year-old Florida student of color, but also big names that are helping to get the book out in a major way. It's a book very much about the realism of a COVID world, a world where Black Lives Matter movement is important to speak to entrenched white supremacy in this country and elsewhere. And yet, in the midst of the gritty realism, there's, I think, a message of hope. Concrete proposals are the emphasis. And we're fortunate through our partners that they're paying for a major publicity campaign with Finn Partners in Manhattan that is trying to get national and succeeding in getting national exposure for the book. The second story, I think I'm going to skip. I was going to show you a clip of this, but I'll put the link in the chat after my time is up and let you glance at that. This is an event we did just last week. It's with a drive-in theater in Cape Town against the backdrop of Table Mountain. It's been downloaded almost 7,000 times now. EcoCiv led a panel of 7 of the top water experts in the world, 2 of them from private industry, others from UNESCO, World Bank, and so forth, with the goal of making clear what solutions are possible when we work together. Let me close. The EcoCiv approach to engagement in 4 points: connecting the vision of an ecological civilization to concrete changes of systems and structures. Number 2, focusing on building collaboration across sectors and retaining the long-term perspective, working with actual leaders and policy experts, and finally, finding common ground while retaining vision and values of ecological civilization. The questions that I think sit before us in this conference: how to link across the process family so that the rising tide raises all boats, how to formulate our unity across our differences, how to adapt our successes in one area to other areas, how to communicate better to the surrounding world, and really to take on the gnarly question, what does process mean in the 21st century? And frankly, why does it matter? Thank you, John.
Thank you, Philip. The book that he has talked about may not be any better or more important in itself than many books, but it is going to be promoted in a big way. So it is going to be an event when it is published. It is published, and that's the breakthrough. It's not that it says things that have never been said before. It's that they are going to be discussed in top levels of the country. So I'm very grateful and admiring of Philip's ability to make things like that happen. And finally, of this section, John Fahey.
I have a handful of slides followed by a brief video that introduces the Cobb Institute in a documentary form. It's not the whole documentary, but it is a introduction to it. So we have everybody from people who've never taken a philosophy course to John Cobb in our community. So we have some education to do, and we're trying to move people from a mechanistic mindset to a process thought. We're not just a process philosophy, we do a lot of practice. These are the types of things that we're focused on, largely right now in the city of Pomona, but also in Claremont and Laverne. Of course, we're driving towards an ecological civilization, building on the backs of local compassionate communities. And we're starting to see other Cobb Institute chapters being built around the country. And obviously, we're all in this together with our partners like EcoCiv and the Center for Process Studies and many, many others, and Pando Populus. This is our new website. We focus on exploring process philosophy, fostering personal fulfillment, and promoting healthy communities. Our Cobb Institute is up to about 60 members. We got 150 friends. We're averaging 55 folks on Tuesdays discussing topics with John Cobb. As you can see, very robust and growing social media presence. And I think a lot of this success has been due to a lot of people who've been around Process a long time. You see some of the names at the bottom, but we've had just a tremendous parade of people who are just so well versed in process thought. And I am so grateful because I've learned so much this past year.
One of the fundamental metaphysical insights of Whitehead is that everything comes out of many things.
This phrase, "we are in this together," of COVID-19 has been perfect because it's true. We are in this together, and it has always been so for process philosophy.
This is about climate change. This is about growing fresh food. This is about creating alternative food systems, which is a right for everyone to have access to fresh food. This is about justice. This is about racial justice. This is about social justice. This is about environmental justice.
And we can go even deeper than that spiritually, right?
And what Process taught me was all of these things are intertwined. They're not separate things.
The Claremont School of Theology recently polled all the alumni for the most impactful professor that ever taught at CST. John Cobb was the #1 professor that impacted students by a landslide.
When we think of compassion and being a compassionate city, it's in alignment with the Cobb Institute. And it's a translation of this idea of philosophy into the real world.
The Cobb Institute, we put process philosophy to work.
This garden is really important here in Pomona because it not only gives people the opportunity to get better and cleaner food, but it also can teach them about where that food comes from and give people the skills to become a lot more self-sustaining. It's just like what they say about giving a man a fish or teaching a man to fish.
When you finally understand the power and benefits of properly using energy and using only what you need, then it becomes very exciting because people can increase their health and decrease their bills and save the planet at the same time.
The intention was that we create a building where everybody on campus says, "This is where I belong." So for me, the Cobb Institute, it's like hand in glove. It fits exactly with who we are and our mission.
We're a small team trying to energize a larger group of people. We're realizing that some folks want to learn more. Some folks are just curious because it is an alternative way of life.
Well, my first impression of John Cobb was that we really did not have anything in common, but some of our larger overall concerns about the nature of the world in which we live have brought us together.
We want to have a good life, quality of life. Also, we want to have enough thing to eat. So how can we do that? How can we do that? We definitely will think differently. Ecological civilization is a way for us to have hope about the future, because it's aware that we are running out of time, that we are just at the edge of the end of an era.
I think you can understand why I think it's so important to have a vision of a world that could survive and really survive indefinitely, sustainable. My name is John B. Cobb, Jr. I'm one of the oldest juniors in the world. Growing together, creatively and compassionately, toward an ecological civilization. What's your philosophy?
Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I hadn't ever seen that before, so I was very interested. Now we are moving to the next phase of this. I hope that you are as impressed and pleased as I am that in the past 5 years, the process movement has really broken into new ground in a significant way. And now the question is, what are the opportunities for bringing much more of this kind of change? And what new kinds of change can we work on? And we are asking Dan Dombrowski to talk about what's happening in philosophy. Do we have a chance of becoming an important part of the philosophical community?
Okay, thank you, John and Richard. Nice to be with all of you. I've got 10 minutes and I want to make 8 points, so let me jump right into the points. The first 6 of which are going to talk about things that are already happening in academic philosophy thought. And then the last 2 will be my tentative comments about what might happen in the future. The first point I'd like to make is that there still are a dedicated minority of philosophers who are process thinkers. And this has been the case for many decades now. They've had an impact, especially in philosophy of religion and metaphysics, and an influence on the Metaphysical Society of America. They continue to flourish in the discipline, but as a minority voice. Secondly, there has been a recent interest in process ideas in hardcore analytic philosophy, which is perhaps something of a surprise. I think this is largely due to the work of Nicholas Rescher and some people like Johanna Seibt, who are using the skills of analytic philosophy to examine the concept of event and time. And also in analytic philosophy, there's been a resurgence of interest in panpsychism. So now it's, perfectly respectable in analytic circles to defend panpsychism, and figures like William Seeger and others. And very often these figures will cite Whitehead or David Ray Griffin in their defense of panpsychism. Third, there's a significant amount of interest in process philosophy in continental philosophy due to people like Deleuze and Isabel Stengers. So there's many philosophers on the continent now, in Poland and France and Germany, Belgium, doing process thought. Fourth, I'm sorry about this bullet point sort of style, but I've got 8 points to make in 10 minutes. So, fourth, process thought often enters into considerations of comparative philosophy. So Whitehead's thought has seemed to be particularly fruitful when comparing and contrasting Western philosophy with East Asian philosophy in particular, but other areas as well. For example, a few years ago in the journal Process Studies, there was an article using process thought to examine Aztec metaphysics, just to cite one example of the ways in which process thought can interact with various wisdom traditions around the globe. Fifth, process thought is still very influential in some circles in philosophy of science, both with respect to the social sciences. There's somebody named Michael Halewood doing work on Whitehead and sociology. Next year, Process Studies will have an article coming out by a young scholar at Oxford University using Whitehead's thought to examine concepts in anthropology. So there are social scientists out there who are process thinkers. And then also there continues to be a significant minority of physicists and philosophers of physics who are process thinkers. I think Tim Eastman is in our audience today, but Tim, along with several other thinkers, keep Whitehead alive in the natural sciences. Sixth, I'd like to reiterate a point that Andrew made, that there's a group of scholars working on something called the Whitehead Research Project, which is basically trying to get a critical edition together of Whitehead's works and publishing previously unpublished things like Whitehead's letters, his lecture notes when he was at Harvard. So the hope is that as more of these materials become available, people will become at a scholarly level more interested in some of the details and nuances of Whitehead's thought that may not have been apparent before time. These works are appearing through Edinburgh University Press. So Brian Henning and the other people working on that project are busy trying to get this critical edition together. Okay, I'd like to make two more points. And I'm really tentative here because I'm convinced that time is asymmetrical, right? So we know what happened in the past, or at least in principle, we could know what happened in the past. But because the future's not here yet, it's very, very difficult, if not impossible, to make any sort of accurate predictions regarding the future. But I think there are two areas where process thought could make a significant contribution in the future. In other words, I think we're punching under our weight, to use a boxing metaphor, in these two areas. And we could make a bigger impact than we have historically. So my seventh point concerns environmental philosophy. So in one sense, process thought has been very much involved in environmental thought. Think of the work of John Cobb and J. McDaniel and many others. Actually, the first PhD dissertation in philosophy, in environmental philosophy, was done by Susan Armstrong. So it was a process, it was a Whiteheadian view of environmental ethics. It was the very first dissertation in that genre. However, the process point of view is still, I think, a minority view in environmental ethics. And the fact that we're accustomed to systematic thinking would seem to position us well to make a bigger impact in environmental philosophy. And my eighth and final point is that it might also be a growth area. I apologize for that metaphor to Philip there, okay? But it may be a growth area for us in political philosophy. So a lot of work has been done in communitarianism, process thought as a version of liberalism. Philip's done work on philosophy, process philosophy and Marxism. But the real energy and power at universities now is in the field of critical theory and politics of identity. At least at my university, and when I read the Chronicle of Higher Education, I realize it's not only my university. Politics of identity is where it's at, right? And there's been some work done in linking together process thought and issues regarding race and gender identity and so on. But when people think of the major thinkers in these areas, they think of Judith Butler or Ibram Kendi and many others, not the people who are seen as identified with process thought. So this is another growth area, I think, or a region in which process thought might be able to grow in the future. So environmental philosophy and politics of identity are areas that may be fruitful in the future. Let me stop there. There's so much more that could be said, but we have a lot of other people that need to talk.
Thank you very much, Dan. It's very illuminating. And I'm going to ask Thomas Oord to speak about Christian theology. He has made a great breakthrough there.
Thanks for the invitation, John, and thanks to all of you for joining us. I have the difficult task of talking about the influence of process theology in Christian theology, knowing that many of you who are watching this, who are also a part of this and could talk about things going on that I have no idea about. It's a very big subject. I'm going to have to limit my talk to a few items, but I just want to upfront make everyone aware that there's lots going on here by those who are joining in on this conversation. I think I want to begin. Well, I've got 3 big points. I'm a preacher here, so I've got a 3-point sermon for you. First point, I think the biggest growth that I'm seeing in the way that process thought is influencing Christian theology, the Christian community, is in what I like to call the 20 to 40-year-olds. That is younger people, many of them who grew up in the evangelical tradition or mainline tradition, some Pentecostals, some Roman Catholics, but younger people who have some kind of connection to a Christian tradition, and yet for one reason or another are disillusioned, didn't find the answers, maybe going through some deconstruction in the way they think about their world. Maybe they've gone through a personal crisis, and they are turning to the resources of process thought for the kind of answers that they're seeking. And you find this kind of activity often going on podcasts, in social media in various kinds of ways, in websites. I want to mention the work of Tripp Fuller here and his podcast, Homebrewed Christianity, which has had amazing influence in the last, I think he's been going 12 or 13 years now. He has been a voice to many, introducing them to process thought. As I look at the kind of ideas in process theology that are attractive to these people, those ideas vary. And I'm sure that most of you can point to some in your own lives, or at least people you know of. But time and time again, it's back to the problem of evil. Many people are asking the question, people who believe in God, who think God is loving, they wonder, why doesn't this God prevent the genuine evils in their lives, in the world? They're fighting against social injustice, and they wonder, why doesn't this God just fix things by omnipotence? And process theology is giving them a way to think about God's power that retains the love. And actually, I suspect if those of you who are Christian on this particular call were to talk, that's one of the main reasons why you found process view of Christianity so helpful. The second big idea that I want to talk about is the way that process theology is impacting the scholarly community. And here I want to talk about the way a label that I like to use, open relational theology, is becoming more and more acceptable in scholarly circles. I think of open relational theology as kind of an umbrella under which process theology is a really important option, but there are other options under there, including what I sometimes call evangelical open theism, but there's some feminists who identify here, and post-colonials and Wesleyans. There's all kinds of people who are under this broad umbrella I call open relational theology. About 15 years ago, some of us got together and started a group at the American Academy of Religion under that open and relational theology umbrella. And in the last 15 years, there's been some really great sessions, some of them very well attended. The current leadership of that group is Andrew Schwartz, who's here on the call, and also Krista Hughes and some others. But that has become a really important voice in the scholarly community. It's also the case that amongst, well, I'll call it evangelical theology, the open theism, or now even open relational theology perspective has a seat at the table. I get lots of invitations, for instance, from publishing companies who want to do a 4 views or 5 views on some subject, and they feel obligated to have something like an open relational perspective as one of those views. And I think that's a promising sign. Also, I should mention that in analytic philosophy and analytic theology circles here in the US, in the UK, and in Germany, and some other places in Europe, there is a great openness to open and relational thinking. There's still a lot of people are shying away from the word process thought in those circles, but the questions of God's relation to time and God's relationality, and some related to panpsychism, are becoming are having an influence there. I'm ready for my last point. My last point, I want to talk about an endeavor that I began 1.5 years ago. And to do that, I want to share my screen. This endeavor is open and relational theology. And let me see if I can get this up and running here. This is the Center for Open and Relational Theology, and many of the people on this call are associated with this center, of which I am the director. It is not specifically Christian. There are some Jews who are part of this center, a Muslim, some people who don't identify with any religious tradition are part of the Center for Open and Relational Theology. Some people who identify with multiple religious traditions are a part of this. Just to give you a little idea, if you go to this website, and I'll put the link in the chat box in a moment, you can go to the what we call our people page and begin to scroll down to some of the voices. And if you're a part of this call and you're not on this center yet, you're not a voice, let me encourage you to contact me to become one. I'm going to scroll way down at the end. We're talking lots of people here, to a list of some of the advisors. These are some people who represent various, sometimes progressive, sometimes conservative, evangelical, mainline, not only the US, but the UK and Europe. Some great things going on there. The Center for Open and Relational Theology may be distinct in its emphasis upon theology proper. Obviously, theology covers a lot of different concerns, but one of the things that we come back to time and time again is, okay, now what does this mean for talk about God or theology? So if it's a question about ecology, we're obviously concerned about that, but the question then gets steered toward, okay, well, what does theology have to say about this ecological concern? Two particular, before I get to that, how much time do I have left? Sorry, I've got several things I'd like to say, and I want to limit myself.
Richard,
just another minute or two.
Okay, great. The Center for Open and Relational Theology has both a really active arm toward the church, toward pastors, toward laity, toward church leaders, and an arm toward the academy. And with the arm toward the academy, I might mention a book series, Studies in Open and Relational Theology. The first book in that series just came out. There are others that are being considered. Also, the Center for Open and Relational Theology has joined with a new online seminary called Northwind Theological Seminary. And we have a doctoral program. I direct that. There are about 15 doctoral students. Not all of them identify as Christian, but most of them do. And some of them are actually joining the conversation with us right now. I think I'll just go ahead and stop there. Thanks again for the opportunity to share.
Well, one of the things he did not share is that he has published a book with the title God Can't. And that book has been a bestseller on the New York Times list. I think it's counted as #1 in a lot of different categories and over a period of months. I don't think there's been anything like that in the past. So
it's actually Amazon, but yeah, thank you, John, for mentioning that. Yeah.
All right, Amazon.
Yeah.
I'd rather you talk about it because you know. But Tom has played a major role in making a major breakthrough in terms of interest in the topics. And as he says, and I think many process folks agree, it's not important that it all be exactly process, and the label open and relational has turned out to be so much more useful. So this is one of those many things that process folks need to take into account as they think about how to become more part of the mainstream conversation.
And I don't believe he mentioned anything about the new degree program in open and relational theology, which also seems significant.
Thanks for mentioning that. Yeah, there's a lot of great things happening there, and I'm really happy to see that blossoming.
Okay. Well, next we have Damian Geddry to talk to us about how we relate to those people who are not church people.
So Tom set me up well, because a whole bunch of those 20 to 40-year-olds that he's referring to are now under the category of the nuns, the duns, and the spiritual but not religious. right now they comprise almost 25% of our population. These are people who either have never had a religious tradition or been involved with one, the nuns, people who were part of a religious tradition and bailed out for various reasons that I'll get to, and the spiritual but not religious who are kind of freelancing it, figuring it out as they go. I put them all under the category of the nuns. And so what I did is I wrote a little ditty here that I think might summarize what the problem is, what the issue is, why these people have either just avoided religious or spiritual communities or simply don't identify. So let me just read this to you, see if it kind of illuminates the situation. Why is a nun a nun? What do they want none of? And what does it really mean when they say, we're having none of that? If we're to believe the data, and I believe we should, they want none of the worldview emanating from so many religions. But let's narrow it down. Because mostly when they say religion, they mean Christianity. A certain brand of Christianity that's selling a strange kind of reality. A reality that's oddly anti-science. A reality that's oblivious to the environment. A reality that ignores the sick, the poor, and the strange. A reality that ignores, well, reality. So let us get real for a moment. Nuns are having none of the omnipotent, anthropomorphic, unilateral, immutable God that somehow ordains a prosperity gospel, pillaging of the earth, and persecution of people who are not straight white men. The nuns, God love them, have a God problem. God, reality, potato, it's all the same thing in their eyes. Nuns are not willing to trade in physics for a God that acts like Pharaoh. They are none too happy about the prescriptive, finger-wagging God. You know, the one that yanks our chain and manages our bodies like marionettes. In their mind, this is some kind of cosmic Big Daddy coercion. And guess what? They're having none of that either. And then there's that sticky wicket called evil, theodicy. When God is rendered as some kind of galactic gladiator that strikes down disbelievers and doles out suffering like Christian karma, nuns are the first in line to say, thank you very much, but no, we're having none of that. In fact, the nuns are basically saying, if your God, your reality, motivates the kind of dogmatic shenanigans we see in the media, well, we'll get our inspiration elsewhere. And so they decamp for greener pastures, organic, of course. They have left behind the judgment, the denial, and the frankly wacko metaphysics, and thus begins a quasi-religious road trip that takes them to exotic destinations. Mindfulness, contemplation, meditation, therapy, soul cycle, and yoga studios, all excellent places to visit. And perhaps they'll find a true spiritual home there. But for some, the nuns, duns, and spiritual but not religious, the question remains. The big cosmic scale questions and the little existential itches just won't go away. And they, like many of us, keep searching. So we know what the nuns are none too fond of, but what's the alternative? What is the solution? How about a grand reopening, where we open up the very idea of reality, divinity, the idea of God? What if we introduce something interactive and exciting? A God that is persuasive rather than coercive, relational rather than unilateral, natural instead of supernatural. A reality where we are truly free agents. In the future, it's a team sport. It's evolution versus creation, motion versus stagnation, and reality as we actually feel it in our bodies. You want to reach the nuns? Repaint reality with some zestier colors. Put our free will in the picture. There it is. Now we're co-creating. God and reality are alive. But I'm obviously preaching to the choir today, and the nuns, they can't hear us because of their earbuds. So this is going to take some work, some translating. Maybe a liturgical model that rotates around beauty, truth, adventure, art, value, and peace. A model that directly engages those big existential questions like meaning, purpose, suffering, and yes, evil. Does this mean we toss out the old traditions? No, we don't. But we need to recharge the metaphors with a new metaphysics. We need to dismiss the God of easy answers. And we must invite the nuns to take a role in the very process of life, because that's real. And I believe they're ready for something to really have faith in. All right, so there's my little ditty. What does all that mean? It means that I think there's a very big audience who can't find any traction. They can't find any center of gravity in a lot of the religious organizations that exist right now. And frankly, they're easy to reach. You know, what I do for a living is, for the last year, is I've become very, very proficient at social media advertising. And they're not hard to find, but the question is, what do we have to offer them? What do we have of value for them? And that's where the hard work's going to come in, because we all know that process can answer a lot of the things that I just talked about. But we have to bring it down into bite-sized pieces. We have to put it into packages that we can hand out and say, hey, here is a solution to your existential question. And that's where I'm going to need help. But I think that's where the opportunity is. That's it.
Well, thank you very much. That's exactly the kind of challenge that I'd hoped would arise out of this event. And I'll now ask Jay McDaniel to talk to us about what's going on in the religious field in a different dimension, that is multiple faiths interacting with each other and relating to science.
So hello to everybody, and it's great to be here. I'm going to pick up on Philip Clayton's question, what is the future of process thought and what does process mean anyway? And I want to also utilize a phrase used in a letter to us. I think it was Richard's phrasing, I don't know. It was the new openness. So I created a PowerPoint and here goes, I think. Except I don't know how to fast forward it. How to forward it.
Just click on it, or there you go. Yeah.
So I like the phrase new openness, but I would like to suggest that openness goes two ways. And yes, many in the world can be open to process, partaking of its outlook on life and way of living. But we in the process world need to be open to people who are unfamiliar with and not necessarily interested in process philosophy. So yes, we have a word to offer. And at the same time, we need to recognize that some people are saying what we'd like to say and saying it much better, much more beautifully. So openness goes two ways. And what is process anyway? To my mind, it is, but it is not simply a worldview. And it's not limited to Whitehead. It's also a more general outlook on life and I believe way of living in the world with practices relevant to daily life. So how can the process outlook and way of life be shared? not by talking about worldviews alone, but also by stories and examples from daily life, and by music and the arts. So who might be open? Well, there's lots of people that can be open, but I want to lift up three: artists and musicians, interfaith leaders, and people interested in spiritual integration. Now, in the area of interfaith first, that can mean two things. It can really mean multi-faith, just that there are many traditions. And here I offer some good news. The process outlook now is being articulated from many different religious perspectives. Jewish process theology, Bradley Artson; Muslim process theology, Farhan Shah; Unitarian process theology, Tandeka; Taoist influenced process theology, Jiho Wang and Meiju Fan; Hindu process theology, Jeffrey Long; Christian process theology, Thomas Oord, and many others; Baha'i process theology, Roland Faber; spiritually engaged, non-theistic process philosophy, at least, Bob Mesley. So it's very important, it seems to me, to recognize that process theology includes and has been deeply nourished by Christianity, but is by no means limited thereunto today. It's a multi-faith tradition. So what does process have to share? Well, it can help various people from various ways articulate their own perspective. It can also really help in interfaith by offering practices such as deep listening, openness to creative transformation, an emphasis on feeling, also ideas. Differences make the whole richer, the possibility of multiple ultimates. It offers a unique conceptual vocabulary that can bring people together so they can understand each other without assuming that they're about the same thing. And of course, a sense of purpose, interfaith in service to ecological civilizations, a compassionate community. It can add all that. It offers opportunities for civic outreach in the US. I myself am part of an interfaith network in Little Rock, Arkansas, that's sponsored by a local mosque. And we offer interfaith explorations. And we use process practices to foster those explorations. Now, we don't call them process, but they can easily be articulated in such terms. And I think the process perspective can well influence colleges and universities if it allies with interfaith groups, which are a growing group in colleges and universities, at the helm of which is the Interfaith Youth Corps with Ibu Patel. So lots to say there and lots to do. And then there are artists, musicians, and filmmakers. Early in my teaching career, I realized that many of my students were at least as shaped, if not more shaped, by films, music, and art as by what's traditionally called sacred scripture. So my own hope is that the process perspective can be utilized to encourage artists and musicians and filmmakers to help communicate process thought in aesthetically engaging ways. Process thought will die as a movement unless it's presented in aesthetically engaging ways that touch the heart as well as the mind. Now, I've done a bit of this myself. In my website, Open Horizons, I profile emerging musicians. I write stories on them, and I call them process appreciations. This is simply to say that your work is really good, and we appreciate it. I do film reviews from an organization called Spirituality and Practice. It started an online platform for emerging artists called the Becomings Collective, but I'm one of many. So this is an encouragement for us all to take heed of the role art, music, and film play in our life. Now, what would really help, this is my dream come true. It won't come true, or maybe it will, to have at least one very well-known musician, I like Lady Gaga, Beyonce, Taylor Swift, or Kendrick Lamar, to discover process thought and lift up its brand. And that would go a long, long way. And here I also just want to give a nod to the importance of the work of John Gill at the Center for Process Studies, working in similar areas. Okay, it can also reach people who are interested in this thing called spirituality. Now, lots of people are. Some are religiously affiliated, some are nuns, some are duns, just like Damian was saying. Actually, there's excellent work being done today in academic circles on what the word spirituality can mean. And it's coming from cognitive science, positive psychology, and ritual studies, where spirituality names something deeply natural, emotional intelligence on the one hand, and embodied wisdom on the other. You put them together, and they have to do with the inside of life and how we live in the world. Seems to me that process thought can help people claim that side of their lives, be they theistic, be they non-theistic, or be they somewhere in between on any given day. Its whole cosmology takes emotion seriously. The universe consists of something like feelings that go all the way down. Subjective form is one of the 8 categories of existence in process and reality. Now, it seems to me this side of life is very important to ecological civilization and compassionate community. So John Cobb raised the question in his letter to us, how can we influence politicians and movers and shakers? Now, our assumption is that if we present them with a worldview and talk about the public policy implications and critique modernity, they will be converted. I think the conversion doesn't happen that way alone. It's to present a way of living that takes the whole of life seriously, including the spiritual dimension. So this takes me to Laudato Si, that beautiful book with which we are in partnership. And you remember in Laudato Si, Pope Francis speaks of the loss of the sacramental dimension in life, the debilitating effects of consumerism on the human soul, the destruction of family life by an overemphasis on merit and upward mobility as a measure of life. And yes, the neglect of beauty is a feature of nature and of human life. Indeed, the self-justifying value, said Whitehead in Adventures of Ideas. So I think insofar as we take these themes and we present them in aesthetically engaging ways, we have a future, and we can move even the movers and shakers. Thanks.
Thank you, Jay. And I'd like to mention that the Pope has issued a new encyclical, Fratelli Tutti, that I think tries to do very much the kind of thing that he's talking about. So the Pope still leads us. And next we will turn to science. Whitehead was a scientist. His own process thought developed out of science, but how much science is open to Whitehead's thought now is a topic of great importance. So, Matt Segall, you're with us. Thank you.
Thanks so much, John, and thanks everyone who has shared the various ways that process thought is being carried forward and applied. I'm a member of the Cobb Institute, and I'm still hearing many initiatives about many initiatives for the first time, so it's very exciting. I have been asked to speak about Whitehead's relevance to science and to scientific cosmology. I have 10 minutes. Cosmology is a very big subject, maybe the biggest that we can engage in scientifically. And I'm hoping that if I talk fast, I can fit in everything I'd like to say. And maybe I'll even get some help from time dilation. The faster you move, time can slow down for some observers. So here we go. I think, Philip Clayton brought up the need for civilizational change. And I think cosmology is certainly relevant to this endeavor to transform civilization. If you think about the history of humanity and our attempt to know and understand the universe, it really seems to have emerged out of a deep relationship to the rhythms of nature, to the seasons, to the movement of the stars and the sun and the moon and the planets. And gradually there was a process of deeper and deeper learning. Humans began to farm, humans began to build cities, humans began to advance technologically by applying science to the world around them, always informed by a worldview, right? And so science is not just a series of methods and disciplines as we have come to understand it in the modern world. It's also a worldview. And cosmology is the domain wherein the worldview, the big picture understanding of what the universe is and how human beings fit into it, links up to all of the special disciplines and modes of inquiry that we think of as the natural sciences today. And Whitehead has so much to contribute to the monumental task of sort of reorganizing all of the special sciences, which have become fragmented, and allowing us to look at the world again and see the ways in which physics and chemistry and biology and psychology and sociology, how they all actually are part of the same universe. And how is it that we can have a universe of intelligent, we hope loving human beings with consciousness and freedom and all the responsibility that comes with that? How can human beings have emerged from this universe if we accept the modern scientific worldview that tells us the universe is a giant entropy factory, giant machine or a clock of some kind, or nowadays a computer of some kind? Then our understanding of the human place within such a universe is going to be one wherein, well, let's reverse engineer it. Let's take it apart and put it back together again in the way that would serve our own ends. And so modern science has become obsessed with the idea that knowledge is power. It's become wedded to a certain set of economic assumptions. And Whitehead offered a critique of this, what he called scientific materialism. But he didn't just critique it. There are plenty of holistic thinkers who critique reductionistic approaches and mechanistic approaches, but Whitehead also offered us really comprehensive metaphysical and cosmological scheme that integrates physics, including relativity and quantum theory, biology, psychology, and even human religious experience, or what nowadays we could call transpersonal psychology. And the thing about Whitehead is that while he was unique, he's not alone, which is the title of a colleague of mine, Robert McDermott's book about another 20th century figure, Rudolf Steiner, who was unique but not alone. There are other 20th century thinkers like Bergson, like Teilhard de Chardin. There are 19th century thinkers like Goethe and Schelling and Hegel, who I think also had the sort of organic cosmological vision that Whitehead articulated in the 1920s and 30s. And so luckily we as process thinkers who are especially influenced by Whitehead and his cosmological vision, we have help from these other philosophers and scientists. So I think I have about 4.5 minutes left. Great. So I want to say a bit more about cosmology, not just as a worldview, which is what I've been exploring, but cosmology in terms of how it branches out into these specific scientific disciplines. I want to talk a bit about physics and the exciting things going on in physics, a bit about biology and how we understand the transition from matter to life, very interesting area of scientific research, and then also how we understand the transition from life or biology to mind or consciousness and the various scientists that are working at these intersections. So in physics, this great documentary about David Bohm has just come out, and there's more and more openness to re-envisioning 20th century physics, quantum and relativity theories in particular, in non-mechanistic ways, in terms of what Whitehead would call an event or process ontology. And David Bohm is a great example, I think, of, obviously he's deceased and was thinking earlier in the 20th century, but his ideas are being rediscovered, and I think there's a conversation waiting to happen between Whiteheadians and those in the physics community interested in David Bohm. Other mathematicians and physicists like Roger Penrose are beginning to recognize the shortcomings of the dominant model of inflationary or Big Bang cosmology, and Roger Penrose has offered a different vision of a sort of continuously creative cosmos, which is, I think, more in line with something with what Whitehead was suggesting to us. Lee Smolin is a physicist who's challenging the entire physics establishment to take time seriously. And obviously, Whitehead is a thinker who shared with Bergson this critique of modern physics as tending to spatialize everything, ignoring the dimension of time, which isn't just a dimension of extension, but a dimension of intention. And so Smolin is really shaking things up, and he always mentions Whitehead, but one of the issues, I think, growth areas perhaps, is all these citations, these mentions of Whitehead in prominent scholars' research in the sciences, they don't go further than the mention or the indication that Whitehead's saying interesting things about this, but I don't understand them. Usually the refrain that I hear. So we need to help scientists understand Whitehead. Carlo Rovelli is a quantum theorist who's working on a quantum theory of gravity. I've myself tried to enter into a dialogue in print with Rovelli, bringing Whitehead's ideas into conversation with his understanding of the realm of quantum events. So there's a lot of exciting avenues to explore in physics. I want to briefly mention a theorist who's working on what's called abiogenesis, an explanation for how life or biology arose out of physics. His name's Bruce Damer, and he has a team. He works with another theoretical biologist and microbiologist, David Deamer, at the University of California in Santa Cruz. And Bruce Damer and I have been in dialogue for a couple years now about the ways that his understanding of the emergence of life, not in the deep sea hydrothermal vents, which is sort of the reigning explanation, but rather the emergence of life in these freshwater ponds fed by geysers on these early volcanic islands. And there's a sort of cyclic or rhythmic process of evaporation and then being refilled by the geysers, and these polymers and organic chemistry start to cycle through in a way I think very similar to Whitehead's understanding of concrescence, this iterative and cumulative process of a kind of proto-evolution. And for Bruce, this process that he's described, and he's been on the cover of Scientific American recently because of this research, is a way of understanding the transition from physics to life, whereby it's continuous. There's not a gap. There's not a, it's not as though life is this totally new thing that wasn't already prefigured in the very matter of the earth itself. This planet came to life. Oh, my time's up. I'll just finish this point. Bruce's point is that the earth came to life as soon as it was cool enough, and as soon as this rhythmic process that's really geological could get going. Life is a natural outgrowth of that. Obviously, this is a very Whiteheadian approach, I would suggest. And so there's so much more to share, but I'll leave it at that, with, I hope, having conveyed a sense of excitement about the dialogues between scientists and process thinkers that are already occurring and will continue to occur. So thank you.
I can't imagine learning much more about cosmology in 10 minutes than we have just been exposed to. Thank you very, very much. And the next item on our program is a break. And so if you need to go. Yes, okay. Well, Richard Rose, are you ready to get us started again?
I am ready when you are, sir.
Okay, let's go.
All right, well, here we go. Let's see if we can do a screen share here. And is that showing up for you all?
It is.
Yes, we see it.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you again for this opportunity to share. I feel it a great privilege and honor to be able to present before this body. I'd like for you all to know that the efforts that we have going on at the University of Laverne began with a conversation or a lecture that John Cobb brought to the university. He asked us how might Laverne contribute and care for the common good. And so from that lecture of Dr. Cobb, we began to meet as faculty and staff with a few students, and we came up with the concept of the Institute for the Common Good. And the vision of the Institute, the Institute for the Common Good is grounded in the values of the Ludwig Center: spirituality, cultural understanding, and community engagement. Through relationships with community partners, ICG becomes a laboratory for integrating disciplines with real-world issues. Our mission: ICG is committed to the generation, transmission, and application of knowledge to serve the needs of underserved and marginalized communities. Our faculty, along with partners from the diverse neighborhoods of Southern California, will engage students through courses, lectures, and internships so the learning becomes a communal endeavor for the common good, creating a world that works for all. We have developed a major, and the purpose of the major is to provide students with a meaningful understanding of and a theory to practice experience of local, national, and global issues related to social and environmental sustainability. The major is designed upon the theory to practice pedagogical model. ICG's community engagement with community partners working in areas of sustainability allows for an interdisciplinary learning approach to issues of sustainability. The result is a benefit to the students, the agency, and the community served through mutual collaboration. Because of ICG's commitment to meet the needs of underserved and marginalized communities, students learn how issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion are intricately connected to sustainability and regenerative policies and practices. Our goal is to produce graduates who can direct and manage sustainable policies and procedures for employers at both large and small companies. By teaching students both sustainable and regenerative practices, our graduates will be forward-thinking as lifelong learners in pursuit of creative solutions to each day's problems, which will be of benefit to the communities they serve. This is the Sustainability Studies major, total program 48 semester hours. The core requirements: Introduction to Ecological Civilization, Critical Community Studies, Applied Methods for Community Engagement, and that will be a type of service learning course that any student in the university can take, where they will serve 25 hours in an agency in the community for academic credit. And community service is a requirement of every student at the university. Wellness and spirituality will be also one of the core courses. All students in the major will have to do an internship, and we're hoping that internship will be at one location over 2 semesters. So we want them to get a real good feel for how that particular organization works. And then there will be a senior seminar and senior project as the capstone. The area requirements, the way we hope to do that is to have faculty from the university with courses that are existing, or to develop new courses that will have various learning objectives that meet these area requirements. Those learning objectives have been established, and we hope to have some grant money to allow the faculty to do these sort of integration into their courses. So hopefully that stuff will be taking place over the summer of 2021. Many of the courses in our core will also fulfill GE requirements for our students. This is an overview of the way the Institute is designed to work. It's kind of busy here, but I hope to guide you through it. The Institute will have a director, hopefully we'll get some staff, with a faculty committee for sustainable studies that will govern the operation of the curriculum within the major. Our academic home will be the Social Justice and Sustainability Department, which is a new department, which is also going through the approval process along with our major this semester. In the Social Justice and Sustainability Department, there'll be the Latinx minor, African American Studies minor, Ethnic Studies, and Critical Race Studies. Those departments will have courses that will be able to feed into the area requirements of the major. Below what you have here, let's see if I can get this out of my way. In terms of the community roundtable, joint conferences, and so forth, through our internships and through our community engagement work, we hope to partner with agencies in the area that are focusing on sustainability efforts. And all of those agencies, companies that we partner with will serve as our community partners that we will have conferences with, at least one conference in the beginning of the year to show what our students will be doing. And then at the end of the year, there will be a time of presenting what has taken place. All of this will be driven by our initiatives, and you just have them, they're just kind of abbreviated there, but we will seek to illuminate the social condition, transmission of information, development of policies, and also the development of human capital, not a good term, but the development of human energies and personalities and resources in the area. And all of this will be driven by an advisory board from the community that will help the director to make sure all of this works. That's it in a nutshell.
Well, thank you very much. I hope that you all understand that the universities have now for some time celebrated the academic disciplines, which in their turn aim to be value-free and not to be informed so much by what's going on in the world as simply by the tradition of the study of a very particular field. In my view, nothing could be more important than that, as the Pope has requested, we reorient our whole university programs to the implementation of what he calls integral ecology. I would say the University of Louvain is taking one major step in that direction. So we have an example of what is needed, and it's needed to be multiplied tens of thousands of times in order to transform our educational system into something that is for the benefit of both students and the world, rather than simply the service of the economic system. So thank you very much, and I'm very gratified by what he has accomplished locally.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, now, is Mark Anielski here?
To the best of my knowledge, he's not. I've been keeping an eye on our our attendee list, and I do not see him anywhere. Mark, if you're here and you're logged in with a different name, please let us know. But as far as I can tell, he's not here.
Well, in that case, we will have a chance to catch up on our time, but I will make a few statements about economics because, in my view, I would say that the theology of the United States and maybe of most of the world is currently taught in graduate economics departments. And it is a very bad theology, in my view. It teaches us that we are competitive individuals and that the world will be a better place if we all act selfishly. And we have so transformed our educational systems that almost the only reason people go to college these days, according to verbal statements, is that they hope to get a better job when they get through. Now, that, from my point of view, is not the primary function of education. I mean, I think it's great that a good education would help you perform better services, but the total victory, if I may use Jesus' language, the total victory of mammon over God in our educational system is something that must be reversed if there is to be any chance of human survival. So one of my heroes in the economic sphere is Mark Anielski, who has been writing about economics of happiness. We now can even measure happiness. And it happens that I think both Harvard and Yale offered a course on happiness and had thousands of students registering for it. I think students would love to know how to be happy in the sense of well off. And they would like for universities to be interested in that being well off. And of course, I think you cannot have individuals who are well off without a world that supports being well off. I was at Chicago at the time, the last days of its attempt to be a center of intellectual life. Within a few years, that was thrown out. The chancellor who promoted it left, and it has become, like almost all universities, a collection of academic disciplines that are not concerned about the well-being of students or the well-being of the world. They're concerned about getting more facts. They call themselves, although the academic disciplines claim to be value-free. We don't need value-free. We need people who really care about saving the world and themselves. So I'm sorry he's not here.
No, John, I should, Andrew just let me know that he's been working with Mark a little bit and has some thoughts that he'd like to share, if that's okay.
Okay, let's do that.
Yeah, so there's actually a lot of exciting things happening in the realm of rethinking economics. And a lot of that has been inspired by early work with John Cobb and Herman Daly and the rise of ecological economics, alternatives to GDP. So one thing is that the Center for Process Studies and EcoCiv have been partnering with the Wellbeing Economy Alliance, which is an international organization working to promote economic transformation around the goal of well-being rather than just growth, which really means expanding our understanding to include things like happiness. Mark is a big part of that work, especially in Canada. We were on a call last week. There's a series of 3 and 4 hour calls with Canadians working on well-being economies throughout Canada. We're also working on developing a well-being economy hub in the state of California and have a launch event coming up in November 12. With major leaders from the state and from city governments, as well as businesses, the head of Levi Strauss and Company, Guna Jung, who was a visiting scholar with the Center for Process Studies a few years back, is now heading up major economic reform in Korea, developed a happiness index in Korea across 16 local governments. We've been working with, twice now I've had on a webinar, Elliot Harris, who's the chief economist for the United Nations. So it's really just exciting stuff, connected to Kate Rayworth, and who's the author of Donut Economics, who got the city of Amsterdam to basically adopt this framework for a sustainable, equitable model toward well-being economies. It's just good stuff all around. And I think ecological civilization can't emerge without a fundamental shift in what motivates and drives our economies and what we understand success to look like in economic modes. So to shift economies to promote well-being of people on the planet, to shift economies towards serving the people rather than serving itself, to switch our sort of priorities away from growth and market activity to well-being, social, physical, spiritual, etc. It's just really exciting stuff. So keep your eyes out on all of that.
Thank you. Now, I'm not sure that we caught up much on our time, but we'll move on to the next topics. Sohn is going to talk about agriculture.
John, we are actually right on time at this point, so we're good.
Okay, all right, we did catch up. That's great.
We did.
And I hope you all got a sense that economics is not a minor topic just because a main speaker turned out not to come. Okay. So.
Good morning. My title today is Regenerative Agriculture, Good Earth Stewardship. And I would like to talk about what's going on this topic and how got me involved in this area, and then why is the problem and where to go. So let's move on to slides keep on going. When I said Earth stewardship, I put it here, good Earth stewardship, because it's a morally excellent organic being. It has a virtue and kindness. That's what is about our living Earth. So how do we become a steward for this good Earth? Richard, can you move faster? I know time is limited. So let's just start basically this definition. What is agriculture? So among the definition, I emphasize food. So there are many directions can deal with this agriculture, but I want to focus on the food and our health. Vandana Shiva said, food is our most basic need, the very stuff of life. And Kathleen just posted the Facebook page, what do you do for a living? I would say, what do you for? Food. So in this case, agriculture really connects directly to personal and basic human need and just essential right. So I began to know what you are eating. It is who you are. When talk about Dr. Cobb's, who he is, we talk about how many books he writes, but actually you can ask what Dr. Cobb eats is exactly what Dr. Cobb is. So there are a variety of the food eater, raw food, vegan food, vegetarian food, and carnivore food. And I had a chance to visit intentional faith community in Europe. One community I visited was Bruderhof about 15 years ago. And then I realized all of their community members wear the glasses, except that these younger children, because they are strictly keep on their diets on vegetarian. When I talk about vegetarian, there are like 4 kinds of vegetarian diet: lacto, pescatarian, vegan. So these are all different type of eating diet really tells us who you are. And then I also visit Loma Linda. There's an Adventist group. This is 10-year older living lifespan as health as a central phase. Then why this chemical increase related to severe COVID-19? This is a time of just difficult, unacceptable time. We began to know about how severe this environmental degradation and pesticide, antimicrobial products and fragrances, among all other flame retardants. These are the chemicals that impact our body and cause a chronic illness and risk of developing severe COVID-19. When we talk about COVID-19, is really related to the chronic disease that environment quality plays a big role, that we begin to have a susceptibility to the risk of dying from it. And this issue really are the main issue of U.S. Center for Disease Control Prevention and the World Health Organization analyzed this health condition, including obesity, diabetes, hypertension, cardiovascular disease, immunosuppression, chronic respiratory disease, or including cancer. These are all risk factor for clinical illness and mortality from COVID-19. And this point, let's imagine and search. What about the world of healthy food, farming system based on organic and regenerative practice? What about the world community restoring ecological integrity of inner and inter and intra-relationship? What if we are living as a steward for well-being of oneness with the community and with a healthy earth? So these are the list that we can imagine, and through our imagination, we can search the direction. So at this point, I'd like to talk about how I got involved with this food industry. One day, I was sitting in my market store my wife and I just created. It was a week after I went to American Academy of Religious Study. It's like a nationally big scholarly gathering place. That was I came first time for the interview, job interview, because after got my PhD, I finished my dissertation, and I was hoping to get a job. The interview there, I already have a sense that this is not the place I should be in, because there's so many great scholars out there look for teaching job. So I give up, and then that morning, suddenly reflecting all my past journey in American life, how come I get involved in this produce industry that I open health market, and I'm the one truck driver, take my truck to all the way to Los Angeles Central Green Market, get the produce, and then have to bring back before market open 7 a.m. So I felt I am the failure. My American dream is gone, and now I turn out to be just grocery market operator. I have to bring all this produce in my truck, driving back to the store. Well, in the middle of bitterness, I began to smell the sweetness of this produce, strawberry. Think about all this sweet smell from produce and fruits. There was a eye-opening moment in my life, and that's just the emotional story. So when we talk about the food, when we talk about source of living, and we began to connect it, and very, very essential. So Ecoterra, as you see, there's a small market. It is an alternative market to, let's say, conventional big supermarket, Vons and Ralph's, and even Whole Food. This Ecoterra is just minimize the Whole Food that offering cooking classes, providing the fresh juice and the fresh vegetables, except the meat side of the shelf. So you can imagine how this journey in my life turned out. And then I realized as I bring back and forth this produce and vegetable, here, 100 kinds of vegetable and fruits. Okay, there is a 3-color, dark orange color is come from out of state or out of a country. And spring green color is more like local. I say like San Diego, Bakersfield, all this I consider as a local. And then there's a light beige color is a little bit further distance, but it's still in the California. So
you've got about a minute left, Sohn.
Okay, so a lot of food come from out of state and then over the sea. So that time, what is good for organic food? Why we have to choose organic food? And then we began to find out some academic research, nutritional quality organic and conventional using vitamin C as a marker, and the difference, which one is a better value in vitamin C. And then we open the opportunity to the local colleges, like, this Claremont colleges, there is a student groups who really want to be in healthy, conscious diet. So we had an event that we watch a movie together and then talk about how important about the health food. So in this case, I want to approach the ecological worldview, what I learned from Whitehead process philosophy, and then John Cobb and some other theistic biocentric view that I learn and apply to my practice and my worldview. So in Whitehead concept, before I use this concept applying to the organism holistic cycle that has a sequence of developmental stage association with a different species which is mutually cooperate. And one of the things for the practitioner experience is important related to the Whitehead concept. But among many experience, there are certain experience more significant than others. I would say this is a lived experience. And this lived experience, some very significant for us, aesthetically pleasurable, multi-sensory experience give us while you are in the garden or farm. So I began to visit local farms and local garden, community garden. And then they already start this healthy practice, boost
we're going to have to cut
biodiversity, possible carbon sequence soil. Yeah. So if you can, Richard, could you move on to the next slide quickly? So there's a Santa Monica local farm and downtown Culver City, Cal Poly Pomona, Ocean View Farm. These all community farm already start their healthy biocycle agriculture. And there is a local farm here, Claremont Presbyterian Church and Temple Beth and Pilgrim Place. But think about it, that's all I visited. Somehow, what place really touch you most? And the micro farm community from Meyer House, maybe the possible alternative for the future, instead of utilitarian, industrious, rectangular bed, more inviting, more appealing aesthetically, more pleasurable community garden we should create. So there are challenges, many challenges for doing work for the earth. There are so many challenges you can.
Son, I'm sorry, we just have to cut you off. You've had
conclusion is there.
5 minutes from Philip Clayton's time, so we need to go on to Philip.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, John.
Okay, I think. Yeah, I think you're good, Phil.
All right, I'm going to haul. I can do this in 5 minutes.
No.
Since my point is to be pithy, it would be a contradiction to be too loquacious. I was assigned mass media, but John played, and I want to push back a little bit. In fact, this is a little bit of a rebellious talk, and I hope that will be in the spirit of process thought as well. I want to pose the question, what would it take for process to move onto the big stage? At the end of my last talk, I raised these 6 questions. I've edited them a little bit. This is the version that I put in the chat if you want to access it and have the file for yourself. Just look at the last 2. What does process mean in the 21st century? And why does process matter? How does it intersect with what people already care about? Please take those as the 2 leading questions for thinking through this, this edgy talk. So mass media, the topic I was assigned, is just one heading. But I think the real question is, what would it take for us to move on to the big stage, the public stage, to be seen as players in American society, or for those of you calling in from Britain or the continent, other parts of the world? And I think that actually really is our challenge. A number of speakers have addressed this challenge indirectly, but Jay McDaniel and Damian Geddry spoke of it explicitly in the talks that they have made earlier this morning. I'd like to name the ambivalence. It seems that we both want and don't want the big spotlight. We express our desire for the process century and so forth, and yet sometimes when it's offered to us, we withdraw. In 3 different ways. We sometimes consciously withdraw. We don't reach out to mass media. We decline invitations to engage. Sometimes, though, semi-consciously. That is, we put our time and energy into events that are designed for other process insiders. And I think a lot of it is completely unconscious. We continue to use insider language. We interact naturally with those who look and talk like us. We avoid the discomfort of divergent views that are held by smart and powerful people. Views where there's actually some overlap in the Venn diagram, but also some differences that would have to be negotiated. And I fear, the irony is, you can wear on the sleeve, in all of these ways, we are like lots of churches, synagogues, and mosques in North America today. I'll just let that one sit. So I think the call of this talk, and the call, if we're interested in mass media, is to frontier work. Consider for a moment some possible parallels with a recent movement known as emergent Christianity. Emergent church groups challenged boundaries and walls. They met in pubs and parks more often than sanctuaries. They went light on doctrine and deep into engagement with the contemporary world. They were cultural creatives. Book titles that I associated with that movement were books such as The New Christian's Dispatches from the Emergent Frontier. Can you imagine process dispatches from emerging frontiers of culture, of literature, of poetry, of art, of spirituality? Another book title, Brian McLaren's Everything Must Change. Among us process people, I want to mention a name that's been mentioned before, Trip Fuller on homebrewedchristianity.com is a cultural creative. He's out there where the intersections are happening. They just did an event called TheoCon. I'll bet if you search on it, you can find it. TheoCon for Theology in Crisis, addressing the COVID crisis from the resources of theology with process and major voice. Thousands and thousands of people have participated in these events. Probably more listeners. Well, Trip Fuller's first major broadcast with John Cobb has been downloaded over 500,000 times. Those aren't figures that we associate with much of what we do. So imagine process thinkers and process centers as cultural creatives in a similar sense. What are some of the qualities that it takes to succeed at this kind of an endeavor? I suggest just the following, that we speak the other's language first, and we translate our language into theirs. That is, that we are much more bridge builders than street corner proclaimers. Maybe we're a little bit too much like John Wesley speaking to his people, speaking to people with scripture on street corners. We need to think of ourselves in some of the other models, like maybe K-pop or something. A willingness to genuinely enter into worldviews different from our own in order to win enough credibility to be heard. We need the skills of Hermes, the messenger of the gods, who translated between the gods and the humans in ways that the two sides could understand each other. And by the way, when you look at that third bullet point, if you think, I don't want to do that, then that's the time to draw a line in the sand to say, here I stand, I can do no other. And to decline the invitation to try to move into mass media and onto the big stage. I'll come back to that in a moment. On the mass media topic itself, I suggest there are 6 keys for mass media success. Number 1, working with partners whom the media are interested in. People whose voices, whose names, whose work, they know that they can market. This is what we've discovered in working with Finn partners in Manhattan over the last months. Using hooks that major groups in American society actually care about. Those may not be what get our hearts to thump more loudly, but they are the key to mass media success. Short, pithy, powerful prose. Damian Geddry has things to teach us here, as I think you just saw. We need concrete, realistic plans for transformational change. 5th, we need some visibility through some successes within our own movement. And finally, we need practice. We have much to learn from J. McDaniel here. He doesn't speak to 6 students without doing some kind of creative mode of communication. His work with Patricia Farmer and others has just been artistically, beautifully multimediaed and open-ended in its fabric. And to practice that as one's daily practice, I think, is crucial for success. To succeed in this, moving on to the big stage, means to think strategically. And my question to all of you is, does the process movement really want to think strategically with all the slings and arrows that brings? For example, who are opinion leaders who are able to change public opinion? How do we build relationships with them? Number 2, what people have the ability to change systems and structures? So those who actually could bring about the steps toward building an ecological civilization. Eugene Shirley has done this really well in LA County. Can we emulate Eugene's work in other places around the country? Among such people, who shows openness to our message? They don't need to be converts. They can be interested parties. Maybe we need to think of ourselves a little bit more like Paul in Athens, Areopagus, who found people who merely built altars was enough for him to find a point of contact. As a Christian exclusivist, he was drawn to polytheists as his audience. Think about it. And finally, exactly what bridges Can we build to these people? And are we really, this is for me the crucial question, are we willing to move within diverse systems of thought and practice? I want to be honest here about our growth areas. Youth, the private sector, leading with policy rather than philosophy, learning new languages and updating our own, moving from didactics to aesthetics, moving from the academy to pop culture. And did I mention youth? Let me conclude. It may be that process thinkers in the process community don't want to move in this direction. It may be that there's a purity and rightness, moral correctness, metaphysical coherence and power to our answer, that what we need to do is to preserve it. Maybe we'll decide that this is like the Middle Ages and we need to write on copying those manuscripts, illuminating them, and waiting for the beginning of a Renaissance, which is still to come. If that's the decision, let's be explicit about it and sort of drop the language of mass media. Let's put up our shingle, let's do our own best work in our own communities, and let's hope that folks come to us. I know something about this because Quakers are a lot like this. If you want to come and sit with us in silence, you're welcome. We don't have a pastor and we don't have an offering bowl, but we always will share the silent worship with you any time and have you join us on the picket line. But if we genuinely want to move into positions of influence, then I believe we need to build partnerships across what may otherwise seem like impermeable boundaries. And in case it hasn't been clear so far in my presentation, I think it's a risk worth taking. Thanks very much.
Yes, thank you very much, Philip. I think if I had known just what you were going to do, I might have put you last rather than next to last. But you spoke twice about youth, or several times. And so we're going to conclude this section of the event with a discussion of the younger generation by Kathleen Reeves.
Hi, everyone. So John asked me to speak to you from the perspective of my generation about how to go big time. And so what's important for you to know about me for the purposes of this discussion is I'm Generation X, female, non-academic, and non-Abrahamic. My faith tradition is pagan, and in fact, I may be one of only a handful of non-Christians here today. So I'm a quadruple minority in the process world, and I'm green. I'm new to the process family, but the warmth and friendliness of this group has made me feel completely included. And from what I've observed, process has two major things going for it. We have so many ideas. We have a perspective that is solution-oriented. And for EcoCiv, we have the best people on the job. But the second strength is warmth. Yes, warmth. Don't discount that warmth. It's inherent in process, and all of you embody that friendliness. That's how we grow. That's why I stayed. You captured my heart. But I have 8 items in 10 minutes, so I'm going to jump in. But remember that warmth and that friendliness. So here are ideas for process going big time from the point of view of a non-academic process pagan Gen X female. And I'm also a poet, so I often use metaphor and story. So number 1, reality bites, the Gen X personality. And for those of you that don't know, that's a 1994 film that spotlights some of the challenges of career and lifestyle choices faced by Gen X. So my parents met at a Catholic youth group the day JFK was assassinated. They loved this president who was Catholic like them and inspired youthful hope. His challenge to Americans echoed through my home, and I believe affected my character. Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. These words challenged every American to contribute in some way to the public good. In 1968, I was a toddler when Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert Kennedy were killed. As I was growing up, I was aware that the good guys were being silenced. In 71, the Manson family murders. When I was 7 years old, the Watergate hearings started, and I asked my dad why my cartoons were replaced by meetings with a bunch of men in suits that did nothing but talk and talk on the television. He told me that the president was in trouble, and I was shocked that a president could do something bad and get in trouble. But my father told me that they're all crooked. Nixon just got caught. In 78, the Jonestown murder-suicides taught me not to trust church leaders, or any leaders for that matter. Welcome to Generation X. Gen X is skeptical, steeped in irony, detached with a sense of dread. We tend to be jaded about the American dream. But surprisingly, Gen Xers still have some optimism that can be harnessed. Just a little bit, but it has to be honest and effective. In the 70s was a spark of the environmental movement that attached a sense of crisis, and my generation was exposed to both problems and solutions. But then in the 80s, nobody cared about any of that. What alternative can a process approach offer us? According to Psychology Today, Gen Xers don't have a program or a strategy for the world. I see an opportunity for process to offer meaning in a way that has not successfully been fulfilled in any other way. It gives us Gen Xers a focus. Reality bites hard, but process philosophy can be some good medicine. We're looking for a cause we can believe in and where we can be effective. And that's why I'm here. And as for even younger generations, I checked with a friend and a professor at Cal State Northridge. I was specifically interested in her anthropology of religion class. The students write spiritual autobiographies for their first assignment. And the most common reasons they describe leaving churches are the pastor or the priest being hypocritical, anti-science, or anti-LGBTQ, the desire to develop a personal, spiritual, integrated life rather than the traditional model. Basically, they leave when they feel their church's stance is harmful to themselves or their friends. I see an opportunity. We provide a safe place. I think the process can be the movement my generation has been waiting for and younger generations have been waiting for. Let's seize the day. The young people are hungry and the process movement has a delicious banquet. We just need an easier way to serve it. Number 2, coming out of the closet, process pride, and why process? People can work on eco-civ or grapple with ontological questions without ever mentioning Whitehead or process. I can care about the world without Whitehead, so why process? We must answer this question. We can do good work and never admit that we're inspired by Whitehead's philosophy. That works for now, but if we don't use the word process, we run the risk of disappearing one day. We are disappearing ourselves when we have the opportunity to spotlight process. Young people want an authenticity in identity. They expect us to know who we are. And what I hear over and over again, people saying, oh, I talk about process in my church or in my group, but I never tell people that's what it is. If we keep saying that, process will disappear. However we refer to it, we need an agreed upon language. I'm aware that there are some who cannot use the word in certain circles. And we have, lost jobs over this topic. And so whatever we say, if we say open and relational or process, we need a unified label and we need to use it. Let's not keep it a secret. Let's create the process package that Damian spoke of. Let's come out of the closet. Number 3, the private club, a problem of translation. Now, this is not news. You all know this, but I bring it up because I have a challenge for us all. We need to find a way to define ourselves so that we can step out in the world and say, hey, world, this is process, and we have something to say. What is essential for process is that the process family comes together and writes a new language, one that's accessible. J. McDaniel has made great strides in that area. Because if you can't communicate, you don't have a voice, at least not one that highlights process. And if we don't do it together, we're going to create a Tower of Babel. We need a Rosetta Stone. And we don't need to teach people the hard stuff. When someone is converting to Catholicism, you don't hand them Thomas Aquinas to read. I really believe that we would be wise to work together on some agreed upon language or talking points. Number 4, it's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. Picket fences and flowers. Now we're all doing great work, but separately. We all like each other. This is the friendliest group ever. Let's use our ability to create a community of care and warmth. It's our superpower. We should join together around some central goals. We need stronger bonds within the process family institutions. And I understand that there are multiple groups and organizations represented here. And of course, we can't just throw out those things that separate us. There's financial and legal borders. But let's not let those borders be walls. How about tearing down walls and putting up picket fences with big white spaces between the slats so that when the Cobb Institute grows flowers, CPS or Pando can see them and share in the fragrance, and vice versa. And I would like to see a giant Zoom process gathering once a year, something like a General Assembly, so that if we start getting siloed in our own organizations again, we have a lure to come back together. Number 5, collaboration, not conversion. Invitation to join the block party. I've been thinking about this a lot, and I'm not trying to convert anyone. Well, maybe I am, but not in an annoying way. I hope they come out of curiosity. So let me go back to my neighborhood metaphor. We need to look around the neighborhood for like-minded organizations. Maybe they live down the street. Maybe they're not in the process family, but they share our values. Let's invite them to the block party. We can meet these new neighbors by joining interfaith groups, activist organizations, and citizen groups, and other existing networks, and similarly formatted groups. We can even start our own collaboration groups or block party, invite others. We can center it around a value such as economic justice or ecology. This will get our name out there. I feel an urgency about process and the timing of events in our world. It's as if a door is open, not wide, but just enough. And we have an invitation to step through into the spotlight. Build bridges, think bigger. Number 6, diversity is strength. I don't think I need to say more on that. Number 7, arts, poetry, visual, and especially musical arts. Music is powerful. Just look at mega churches. And number 8, I heard this quote once. Ideas won't keep, something must be done about them. Yes, let's go back to the man himself, Whitehead. Let's take his advice and come away from this meeting with some solid next steps. Let's do something about our ideas and let's do it together. I have so many more ideas, but not enough time to expand on them. So we can't just be philosophers anymore. We have to think beyond the walls of universities. We have to look for the open doors and enter together. So in summary, number 1, seize the day. Our time is now and the kids are hungry. Number 2, process pride. It's not a secret anymore. Number 3, tear down the walls and build picket fences, create an annual Whiteheadian gathering. Number 4, won't you be my neighbor? Throw a block party and invite people from our common value neighborhood. Number 5, create a Rosetta Stone instead of a Tower of Babel. Number 6, diversity in every direction. Number 7, creativity and the arts. Sing a process song. And number 8, do something about our ideas. The door is ajar. Let's open it and step through together. I feel a lure, do you? So if we were gathered in the same room right now, I would ask you to do a little ritual. The Cobb Institute knows about me and my little rituals. But I would ask everybody to join hands. So I'm just going to imagine that we're all joining hands while I say the words. I put my hand in yours so that together we can do what I cannot do alone. Thank you. Peace, salam, shalom, om, shanti, shanti.
Well, I was smarter than I thought when I asked her to conclude this section of the program. But beautiful statement and genuinely out of her own life experience. We thank you. And we still